Hello, lovely viewers. You are most welcome to our channel Poetry Online. In this video, we shall be presenting to you the summary and analysis of the book Our Sister Killjoy, or Reflections from a Black-Eyed Squint by Ama Ata Aidoo. Kindly subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to get updates on all our new videos. Once again, let us assure you of a very interesting discussion. Get ready for this lesson. Ama Ata Aidoo is a Ghanaian from the Akan matrilineal clan of Ghana, where power held by men is channeled through female descent, thereby demonstrating the relevance of women's agency in maternity and matrilineality in the society. This gives Ama Ata Aidoo the self-confidence to be revolutionary in her literary works. She is a notable playwright. Among other female playwrights such as Ifwati Sunderland, she is probably the best-known African woman writer, a recognition she deserved as her art has attained a maturity worthy of her talent and dedication. She is a feminist who believes in the power of the female folks. Consequently, she creates strong, intelligent, resourceful, and resilient central female characters in her works like Anua, Our Sister Killjoy, and Changes. Each of her female central characters represents the heroine on the feminist stage who was depicted as fashioning her own method of revolt or breaking bounds to gain what she wants and not merely as a tool for stratifying man's ego. Ama Ata Aidoo also advocates for equality for both men and women to utilize their talents, gifts, and abilities to the fullest. The concept of women empowerment and equality are some of the many issues that feminists in every persuasion show interest in. Women empowerment and the struggle for equality and equal opportunities as concepts are not only a recurring theme in literature, but also it is central to the lives of women. Ama Ata Aidoo, an avowed feminist, strongly rejects gender stereotype that seems to imprison, hinder, limit, and deter women from reaching their full potential. Our Sister Killjoy, or Reflections from a Black-Eyed Squint, is written by Ama Ata Aidoo and published in the year 1977. The protagonist of the novel is Sissy, a Ghanaian student who travels to Europe on a scholarship. The narrative is a prose-verse form, depicting the thoughts and encounters of Sissy, whose opinion is shared by her encounter with the Western world and its comparison to her homeland Ghana or Africa at large. She also comes across the hypocrisy and corruption of the African elites. The novel, Our Sister Killjoy, does not only examine the role of modern African societies, but also comes up with the problems of women around the globe. Sissy's name is an indication that her character and personality has been formed in a community. She is a sister to her people in Ghana and Africa at large, whom she had led behind to see Europe. Sissy is considered a killjoy by both her people in Africa and blacks in the diaspora because she always tells them the truth. This is something that women are not supposed to be known for. Women are supposed to be timid and shouldn't share so much opinion. However, Sissy goes against this societal norm as she is very vocal and shares her opinions openly. Her people in Africa believe that traveling out of the country or traveling out of Ghana to a Western country is a sure way to succeed, which is not true. While Africans in the diaspora living in dire situations refuse to return to the warmth of their own countries. This is what Ama Ata Aidoo condemns. Our Sister Killjoy, or Reflections from a Black-Eyed Squint, tells the story of Sissy, a young African woman who goes to Europe to better herself and receive a proper education. In the process, she discovers the realities of colonization, Europe's effects on the young Africans, sponsors, and how both whites and blacks have been mistaught about the realities of race and racism in their everyday lives. The novel is divided into 4 sections. The first part is called Into a Bad Dream, where she travels to Germany. Her allied host took very good care of her, making her comfortable, from luxurious Mercedes-Benz that comes to pick her to lavish dinner and expensive European wine. She meets Sami, who is a fellow countryman, whose real name she did not catch. Sami laughs loudly, and when not laughing, he smiles continuously. She feels Sami had been placed there to sing praises to the European land. She feels shivered and uneasy. She eventually realizes that she is the only black person there, though she does not feel insecure or inferior about her identity or race. This section ends with power to decide who to live or who to die, which throws some light on the colonial and post-colonial aspect of the novel, considering it was power which decided who survived and who died. The second section of the book, or the second section of the novel, is titled The Plums, tells the story of a romance between Sissy and Marija Summer, a German woman whose husband is never home, and who begins to fall in love with Sissy. Every day, Marija picks plums off the trees in her yard and she feeds them to Sissy, who compares herself to the plums. Despite her love for Sissy, Marija is horribly uneducated about the matters involving Africa and the race. Sissy quickly realizes that Marija and her friends think of her as exotic and strange, rather than a real person with feelings and goals. Marija thinks that Ghana is near to Canada and laughs at her own ignorance. Eventually, Marija declares her love for Sissy, who rejects her and goes to Monash. The third section of the novel is titled From Our Sister Killjoy. She travels to London this time. England is another thing, she says. There were men, women, and children everywhere. They appeared wretched. She watches her own people, deserted and poorly clothed. Women and children in pitiful conditions, dressed up in rags, making desperate but unsuccessful attempts to keep themselves warm. She is anguished to see her people, leaving the warm homes of Africa to live in the chilly winters of London. She does not understand that the unfree population thinks that they'll do well of themselves, not realizing that they'll run very fast just to remain in the same place. She is also distressed by the fact that they never told the truth at home. Sissy meets a Ghanaian self-exile, Kunle, who believes that the problems of apartheid will be solved by Western technology. He elucidated his points by stating the fact that a good Christian white South African doctor used the heart of a black man for a transplant to keep an old white man alive. When questioned by Sissy and a friend on which hearts were used in earlier attempts at transplants, he answered eagerly he must have experimented on the hearts of dogs and cats. Sissy realizes Kunle values the colonizer's world more than his own and belongs to the category of the Bintu, who come home to complain and exploit rather than build a nation and improve the conditions of its material environment. Ama Ata Aidoo emphasizes the dire conditions and necessities which force families to beg for aid and to hope that the prestige associated with Bintu will improve their living conditions. Sissy soon realizes that the land treats animals like humans and vice versa. This section ends with Kunle's death, his car being burned down to ashes. The fourth and final section of the novel is titled A Love Letter. The final section of the novel is written as a letter from Sissy to a former lover who has decided to remain in exile in Europe. Sissy's letter is angry and bitter as she writes about how those in exile have left their country behind to falter because they refuse to bring their education back to help those who need it. She writes about the brain drain happening in Africa, where the smartest and most capable people live, are educated in the West, and remain there, never returning to become teachers, doctors, or engineers in their home countries. Sissy writes about how choosing to love a man who can do this to his country makes her question her own worth as a strong African woman. She decides not to send the letter, instead choosing to return to her home to tell the true story of her time in Europe. The tone of this section is relatively calmer as compared to the previous three. Sissy writes this letter to her lover, who has decided to remain in exile. But instead of it being a dialogue between a man and a woman, it looks more as if Sissy is speaking her mind. The letter is more political in nature than romantic. Sissy is a killjoy who asks her lover and others in exile to come out of their delusion and forces them to acknowledge their duties towards their motherland. Sissy is troubled that she cannot speak to her lover in no other language but a colonial language, distancing them. Inflamed by the fact that he does not see this as an issue, what he considered a problem is that she's too aggressive, too outspoken, too serious. She wishes that he will stop confronting him. Rather, he will now hold her in his arms. For Sissy, her desire for this man comes in direct opposition of her strength as an African woman. As she states, she says that any female in a position would throw away everything to be with you and remain with you. First, her opinions, and then her own plans. But what did I rather do but daily and loudly criticize you and your friends for wanting to stay forever in alien places? Maybe I regret that I could not shut up and meekly look up to you. But you see, no one ever taught me such meekness. In this love letter, Sissy recounts a meeting with the African self-exiles. Sissy speaks out at an African Student Union meeting. They spend hours discussing the political situation of Africa, but do not see the denial of their services as part of the problem. In the final line of Sissy's letter, she recalls what her lover asked her when they met. I know everyone calls you Sissy, but what is your name? We do not know your real name, but she is the messenger of a king to the land of exiles. She ends her letter as the plane moves towards the West African coast. She decides not to send it. She will tell the tale back home. In our sister Killjoy, Ama Ata Aidoo's heroine, Sissy, represents a new educated African woman who expresses her concern in relation to the larger global issues such as racism, post and neo-colonialism, imperialism, the economy, language, and culture. Our sister Killjoy portrays a young educated Ghanaian woman, Sissy, who travels from Ghana to Germany, England, and back to Ghana. In her interactions with other people in the course of her travel, Sissy forever carries Africa's problem on her shoulders, as if Africans have paid her to do so. Through her, Ama Ata Aidoo examines the past and current issues of colonialism, neo-colonialism, imperialism, racism, culture and language use, nationalism, and sexuality encountered by Ghanaians in their relationship with the West. Ama Ata Aidoo uses Sissy as a tool of social analysis, although it is not so much of Sissy's experience in the Western developed world which shapes her views of Ghanaian or Western society as her conscious identification of herself as a Ghanaian in Europe. Most importantly, Sissy becomes the mouth, eyes, and ears of Ghana in the foreign lands she visits. She makes it a point not only to think about the third world problems, but also discuss them with various third world people in search of understanding and possible solutions. The first issue that Ama Ata Aidoo critiques in Our Sister Killjoy is the unrelenting glorification of the West by Ghanaians and Africans in general. Most Africans believe that the flight to European and Western countries is the ultimate indication of progress and success that they should aspire to. As Sissy notes, her trip to Europe is discussed as if somehow going to Europe was altogether more like a dress rehearsal for a journey to paradise, and it becomes a sign that our sister has made it. Ama Ata Aidoo satirizes this idealization of Europe and immediately contrasts it with the reality of racism and poverty that awaits the majority of Africans who immigrate to this promised land. At a dinner organized in Sissy's honor, she meets Sami, who had obviously been to Europe and was anxious to make Sissy realize that she was unbelievably lucky to have been chosen for the trip. His voice, as he spoke of the far-off land, was wet with longing. This, instead of pleasing Sissy, fills her with disgust and sadness. Like other Africans, Sami suffers a lack of self-worth that is a product of colonial intimidation and its conscious process of socialization. Through Sisi's reaction, Ama Ata Aidoo demystifies the notion of the West as a land of opportunities and prosperity, demonstrating instead that the legacy of colonialism continues for Africans who seek their fortune abroad, where the common experience is one marked by racism and further subjugation and degradation. The concern of the Ghanaian feminists is the need to instill self-worth in the bid to prevent the mass migration of Ghanaians and Africans at large to Western countries instead of staying and developing the countries and continent as a whole. Unfortunately, the journey to the promised land that is presented to Sisi by Same had become a bad dream for her and for many other Ghanaians and Africans who go there. Sisi experiences her first instance of racism when she is asked by the flight attendant of the plane if she wants to join her two black friends at the back who were also, coincidentally, on the same program. Ama Ata Aidoo uses this incident as a point of entry to a critique of racism. Consequently, even though Sisi is able to ignore the subtle racism by the flight attendant, the difference in her complexion actually dawns on her when she is called a black girl. She takes time to look around and is forced to do something she regrets for the rest of her life when she is made to notice the differences in human coloring. Where the skin of white people are the color of pickled pig parts that used to come from foreign places to the markets at home. Sisi would not have reacted in that manner if her attention had not been drawn to her own skin color. Other Africans who make that journey in search of better conditions experience worse forms of racism. They realize that, as immigrants, most of them do not find the freedom, self-realization, and success they hope for. Instead, they are judged by the color of their skin. Despite the challenges faced in foreign lands, Africans will not come home because the situation still seems much better than at home. Sisi discusses this with an Indian doctor who has been in Germany for a number of years working as a doctor. In answering the question about why he remained, the Indian draws Sisi's attention to the higher number of Ghanaian doctors in Germany who have refused to go home. Not knowing what to say, she agrees with the Indian, the Ghanaians, and many other Africans living and working in foreign lands, in this case doctors, that going to work in a state hospital is unnecessary slavery they should not subject themselves to, since most of the leaders of their countries care only about bettering themselves. Sisi's sentiments provides the opportunity for Ama Ata Aidoo to comment on another third world problem, the brain drain. The large-scale migration of skilled professionals to the West greatly affects Ghana and the African continent as a whole. According to Sisi, no one stays in, but those of us who fear we cannot survive abroad, one reason or the other. Through Sisi, Ama Ata Aidoo expresses anguish at the fact that the few human resources Africa possesses are being taken away from her. Ama Ata Aidoo calls on the Ghanaians and Africans in foreign lands to return to help in building Ghana and the continent as a whole. She expects that women should also be concerned about the effects of the brain drain on the policies and development of their countries, bearing in mind that women suffer the worst in impoverished countries. However, she blames Ghanaians and African leaders for their inability to keep the few intellectuals at home. Ghanaian women, or feminists, are therefore stressing the importance of maintaining and utilizing our intellectual resources to produce development instead of losing them to the developed world. To further compound Africa's problem, those Africans who return from these foreign lands come with grandiose ideas on national development which do not tackle the needs of the country. They become champagne-sipping ministers and commissioners who sign away minerals and timber concessions in exchange for yellow weeds which the people can't eat. This is because they have forgotten the problems of their nations and their compatriots. Instead of making wise decisions that will bring development to the people of the country, they take decisions that deteriorate the nation's already fragile economy, thus increasing the level of poverty in the country. Ama Ata Aidoo also criticizes those she calls the moderates, that is, people who ignore the real problems that the society faces and instead subordinates the interests of the majority of the people to those of the bosses and foreign dominators, upholding the sanctity of the UN Charter, enforcing law and order, and blaming all the problems on population expulsion because their ideas for development are not even their own. Ama Ata Aidoo's criticism extends to the academic pseudo-intellectual whose ideas for development are even more dangerous than the moderates, who in the face of reality that is more tangible than the massive walls of the slave forts standing along our beaches still talk of universal truth, universal art, universal literature, and the gross national product. The result of such statements, such as education has become too expensive, the country cannot afford it for everyone. However, our representatives and interpreters, the low achieving academics in low profile politics, have the time of their lives grinding at cocktail parties and around conference tables. In other words, money spent on cocktail parties can go a long way to provide educational and health facilities that will help reduce problems such as maternal and infant mortality rates in Ghana and Africa as a whole. Ama Ata Aidoo thus condemns the educated elites of Ghana who, in the face of several societal problems, offer empty rhetorics on national development which does not address the need of the country. Consequently, these individuals only encourage Ghana's or Africans' present culture of inequity, corruption, and neo-colonial submissiveness, which only worsens the glorification of the Western culture and results in further prejudice, exploitation, and poverty. Another issue of concern to Ama Ata Aidoo is a problem of language. It is a very important tool for fostering Ghanaian and African values. However, Ama Ata Aidoo knows that the exodus of African youth to Western countries to study prevents this fostering from happening. Language, therefore, becomes a form of oppression for Sisi and other African immigrants who have no choice but to use the language as well as adapt to a culture which is not their own. According to Sisi, the legacy of imperialism still persists since she and many other Africans have only been able to use a language that enslaved them, and therefore the messenger's mind always comes shackled. If Ghanaians and Africans are mindful of maintaining African customs and values, then we must be concerned about the children and grandchildren returning from Western countries with whom we can't communicate because they speak only English, French, Portuguese, or even German, and we do not. Sisi summarizes in a letter to her lover the extent of oppression through language. All that I am saying about language is that I wish you and I could share our hopes, our fears, and our fantasies without feeling inhibited because we suspect someone is listening. As it is, we cannot write to one another, or speak across the talking cables, or converse as we travel on a bus or a train or anywhere, but we are sure they are listening, listening, listening. In a love letter written to an imaginary lover, Sisi recounts a conversation and experience with her brothers. In Sisi's letter, Ama Ata Aidoo sends invitation to the brothers to join the train that leads to a change in the neo-colonial situation in Ghana and Africa at large. The Black Eye Queen discusses a number of issues with her brothers who do not really listen. She was never able to discuss the survival of the African race. Instead of criticizing the lover and his friends for wanting to stay in alien lands, she was expected to shut up and meekly look even when she disagreed with him. By mockingly claiming that she has a big mouth, Sisi defies her lover and other Ghanaian or African men who want to mold the African woman into a controlled and passive object. She writes, "No, my darling, it seems as if so much of the softness and meekness you and all the brothers expect of me and all the sisters is that which is really Western. Some kind of hashed out Victorian notion. Allah, me and my big mouth. See, at home, the woman knew her position and all that. Of course, this has been true of the woman everywhere, most of the time. But wasn't her position among our people a little more complicated than that of the dolls of the colonizers brought along with them who fainted at the sight of their own bleeding fingers and carried smelling salts around all the time to meet just such emergencies as bleeding fingers? Here, Ama Ata Aidoo is questioning the construction of the African woman as created by modern African men. In reality, the African woman is more complex. African women are courageous and bold, and they play a very important role in the African society. The woman should have the right to air her views on various social issues as well as make critical decisions concerning her life, whether sexually, politically, economically, and socially. She also encourages Ghanaians and African women to be bold and speak, as well as fight for their liberation and that of their countries and continent as a whole. The novel ends when Sisi is on the verge of re-entry into the Ghanaian society. She arrives with different perspective and is ready to reintegrate into the Ghanaian society, thereby giving hope for a positive change for the country through women. To be able to tackle patriarchal structure at home, Ghanaian women should examine and explore their roles in the society before the hashed out Victorian notion of women was adopted. However, the situation of women in Ghana varied from one ethnic group to the other, and their roles in the various communities were and are still not the same. Let's now move to the major themes of the novel: racial discrimination, brain drain in Africa, glorification of the Western countries, failed leadership, and loneliness and friendship. Thanks for watching this video. Please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video.